Hello everybody and welcome back to another exciting and festive edition of Boyographic, the show in which I, Matt the Gameboy, talk you through the highs and lows of the Gameboy library, one card at a time. Well, it wouldn't be Christmas unless I focused on a slightly Christmas themed game now, would it? So this week we're looking at Home Alone. In December, as work inevitably intensifies and stress levels rise with it, there is a shining beacon of hope at the end of the month known as Christmas. The one day of the year where most people who sit behind a desk, use their hands or work in retail, are allowed the comfortable solace of a day off work to drink, get gifts, and eat their body weight in sugar. Fortunately for those who are unlucky enough to work on the 24th or 25th of December, depending on when you celebrate it, there's generally a bank holiday around there somewhere where they too can enjoy the oversaturation of self-indulgence that Christmas brings. For those who celebrate Christmas, this period is filled with little attempts to get festive. This can range from writing cards, listening to Christmas albums, and wrapping presents. For me, this feeling of Christmas is best embodied by what I consider the holy trinity of Christmas movies, namely The Nightmare Before Christmas, Die Hard, and Home Alone. Perhaps the most unfestive of films if you really think about it, but I guess they at least allow us some perspective that Christmas with the in-laws isn't all that bad. With a lack of games based on the other two movies, I got stuck into THQ's Gameboy adventure based on Chris Columbus and John Hughes' festive favourite. Instead of telling the tale of Kevin McAllister as we all know it, namely being left alone for Christmas, swinging paint cans with enough force to decapitate, and making us relive the pain of stepping onto micro machines, THQ actually positioned this game's plot as somewhat of a sequel, and no, not the one you're thinking of. The Wet Bandits have returned to the McAllister household with reinforcements in order to give Kevin what for and rob his home of valuables, toys, electronics, and pets. As Kevin, you must run around the level, collecting each of these items and avoiding Harry, Marv, and their henchmen, who will not only try to hurt Kevin, but attempt to steal any loot he leaves lying around. Once Kevin has collected these items, some clearly visible to player, while others are hidden in kitchen sinks, behind picture frames, and even down toilets, it's his duty to throw them down the laundry chute and into the basement for safekeeping. It sounds like an incredibly generic premise on paper because, well, it is. Where this game actually takes a strange right turn is the fact that once Kevin has thrown the number of collectibles indicated on the top right of the screen down the chute, he then needs to enter the basement to fight off other enemies and an end-of-level boss. It starts off reasonably enough. The first boss is a giant tarantula like Buds in the movie. The second boss, a giant rat, which you'd expect in a basement. But the third is a ghost, because, as I said, this game is incredibly generic. It won't surprise those well-versed in Game Boy developers to learn that this game is actually developed by Imagineering Inc., the folks who gave us such wonders as Escape from Camp Deadly and Swamp Thing. The game I constantly gave myself as a frame of reference while chanting the mantra, "It could be worse, it could be worse," while playing Home Alone. What frustrates me more is, though, it could have been good. Home Alone actually isn't that bad a game for the first two stages. You run around trying to avoid the Wet Bandits and their henchmen, who can all be kept at bay by either your water pistol or by using a variety of weapons you find dotted around the levels. There's a slingshot, a baseball, and in later stages even a pellet gun, though it does take a lot of ammo with these weapons to take an enemy down. You could also make use of the game's environmental traps to take inspiration from the film, like hot irons and bowling balls, but they can be hard to utilise. Finding some of the loot you need can be a little obtuse at times also, and generally means you'd be jumping at every detail in the stage, hoping to find a collectible. But to the game's credit, most of them do contain either an item you need to complete the stage, or a pizza. In this game there are two kinds of pizza, a slice where, when you collect 8, grant the player an extra life, or a full pizza that restores one of Kevin's hit points if you've been hit by a bandit. The level design is generally just you walking through the house with a light bit of theme dressing based on the level's collectibles, such as giant soldiers for the toy stage, and things like scratching posts and carry cases for the pets. They're pretty easy to navigate and offer laundry chutes always around the time your inventory gets full of collectibles. Here and there, you'll also find a nice reference to the movie, like a climbable set of shelves that fall apart when you reach the top, and piles of broken Christmas decorations littering the floors. It is a shame though that there's no reference to Angels with Filthy Souls, the gangster movie that Kevin watches at home, but at least they put in Game Boys as collectible electronics. However, the game seriously spikes in difficulty on the third stage, with the fourth becoming infuriatingly hard due to seemingly unlimited amount of cheaply placed bandits and just by having too many pets to collect. You end the game not only by fighting Marv and Harry, but actually by taking on the game's scary furnace. Sure, it makes no practical sense, but this boss is at least a nice homage to the source material. Pity that 90% of the kids playing this game back in the day probably never got there. As to make matters worse, the game has limited lives and continues. Oh no indeed, Kevin. As I mentioned, this game was published by THQ, who also published several other Home Alone titles on other platforms around the same time. The SNES version, also by Imagineering, is pretty similar to the Game Boy version, but in my opinion is a lot less fun. Bethesda of all people made the NES version of the game that sees you running around your house trying to survive for 20 real-life minutes by trapping enemies Heionkai alien-style in holes. And it's about as fun as it sounds. So it's such a pity that Sega tried to do this for their Master System, Mega Drive and Game Gear versions of the game. The Mega Drive and Game Gear versions at least tried to put a little thought into this idea, as well as having multiple houses in the neighbourhood to protect. The Master System game just ends up being very arcadey and not too true to the movie, which is a little sad. Because of this, and as horrible as it is to say, the Game Boy version, despite its flaws, is probably the best one to play if you need some Home Alone-based gaming in your life this Christmas. The graphics are nothing to write home about. I'm sure John Williams is still upset at the hash this game made of his opening theme, and despite a promising start to the game, it stumbles horribly at the end with a few poor design choices that instead of upping the challenge to the player by fair means, just cheap out and throw too many enemies at the player for anybody to really have fun playing it. It's worth picking up if you find it cheap, as you'll probably agree with me that at its core, the game is surprisingly solid. I'm just sad that Kevin didn't wish for a little more love to be put into the Game Boy version of this game, instead of wishing to be left alone at Christmas. And that brings us to the end of another Boyographic, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you've enjoyed. If you have, then please subscribe and share this with other people you think may be interested, as hey, that's how it gets around. If you are a new viewer, why not check out some more of our Boyographic videos where I look at the highs and lows of the Game Boy library one card at a time, some more Boyographic videos where I look at bootlegs and oddities for the Game Boy and Game Boy Color, as well as our All the Glory videos where I play through a game, cutting out all the deaths, leaving you with none of the faff but all of the glory. Until next week, Game Boys and Girls, there will be another video addressing the state of this channel going up very soon, so please look out for that. But if you're watching it at the time of release, I wish you a very Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year if that's what you're into, or a good holiday season if not. You can find me until the next video on Twitter at Gameboy and at Facebook and Instagram at /Gameboy, same place. Until then, Game Boys and Girls, Merry Christmas and game on.